noticed the signage wasn't updated. They've actually renamed the conference OMMA Metrics and Analytics.
Oh.
Jeffrey, if you could please hold the mic up to your mouth.
Good now? Okay. That's right. Actually,
couldn't hear that,
I dug a lot deeper into the data than some of the superficial information, and it may interest you to know that Lynn actually has more assists than anybody in his first starts than anybody. Actually, more than one person, John Stockton, who you might guess. Number 3. The point is, he's making other people successful, right? It's about a team, not an individual superstar that gets a lot of credit for last-minute buzzer beaters. And sometimes there's a hidden catalyst that takes us in. So our topic for today right now is the analytical enterprise. What are the processes, the people, and the technology that'll make you successful in the analytics world today? So my name is Jeff Miller. I run North America for Acceleration. We're a global marketing architecture firm where we provide data and technology strategy and integration for clients ranging from Safeway grocery brands, which combines online and offline data, as well as clients like Wall Street Digital Network. And we've got a panel of experts today that represent a number of points of view, from research to analytics to technology to the agency side. So I'll let them introduce themselves very quickly with who they are, what their company does, and how they fit into the ecosystem, and we'll quickly get into what makes a successful analytics enterprise.
Good morning. I'm Andrew Edwards. I'm CEO of Technology Leaders. We are a web analytics and a multi-channel analytics consulting company based here in New York, mostly serving the enterprise, and our customers are mostly in North America, and some of them are in Europe.
So my name is Stephen Messer. I'm co-founder of Collective Eye. The Collective Eye is a knowledge network, essentially trying to deliver the entire business intelligence stack as a service, a la Salesforce.com, et cetera.
Lauren Moores, Chief Data Officer or Guru with Compete, Kantar Media Compete. We provide global multimedia, multi-channel consumer insights.
I don't know how to follow a guru. My name's Chris Pine. I'm Chief Strategy Officer of Mediacom North America. We are one of the largest media planning and buying agencies in the world. Our digital department is the largest in the world. We have one of the fastest growing analytics and digital analytics groups out there, and there's a few faces I think I can see out there, Ethan. And we work very, very closely with you guys as vendors, with Compete particularly, and we'll show you a couple of examples of today of how our organization and Compete do work incredibly well together. So excited to be here.
Great. And I surprised the moderator and the organizers here by sitting up here. They said, "Are you on this panel?" I was, in the world of data, you have to be reactive and be ready for surprises. I was left off the agenda, but yes, I was supposed to be here. My name is Rick Bruner. I'm Vice President of Product at Marketing Evolution, more than a decade-old company, leader in cross-media ROI analysis, and I'm on the newer side of the organization where we're coming out with a number of analytical software products that I suspect I'll have a chance to describe a bit more in the context of the panel.
Great. Now, big data is a big topic. So where do you even start? So Chris, we're going to start with you.
Sure.
And the format's going to be here. Everybody jump in and do not agree with Chris. But the first topic is literally, where do you start? How do you even define success across the age of big data, and what are some of the hidden success factors?
Well, that's a big question with big data. I think when we look at where we were to where we are right now, we used to use data a lot for optimization, in-market optimization, making 5 or 10% improvements out there in terms of our clients' campaigns. Where we are now with access to absolutely every single piece of data available in the whole wide world, in fact, Group M as a whole has access to 100% of the internet every single day, so that's a lot of data that's available to us. What we're finding is that we are actually being able to use data in a specific way to find brands' white space. If we think about where we used to be, it was all about finding 5 or 10% efficiencies. Now we can find 50% effectiveness, 100% increases in effectiveness, because the data that we have available to us not only tells us how to optimize our campaigns, it tells us now who we should be reaching. Like something like Compete, Lauren next to me has a panel of 2 million individuals that I can access on a daily basis. It tells me how to segment in a much more effective way than previously. With all of the fast-moving data, it helps me understand how to engage with my consumers, where they are, what they need at one particular time. And then it also tells me how and where to reach it. So in fact, it makes my job the easiest job in the whole world, because I have so much data available to me on a daily basis. Where the real challenge comes in, I think Suraj talked about this a little bit earlier, which I think is incredibly important for us, is that, you know, the brand marketers that I deal with on a daily basis are drowning in data. We as a group of analytics professionals, we love it, and we love having a metric about absolutely everything. But out of, on average, every 100 different metrics available for every single campaign that we have, maybe 5 of those are actually relevant to the outcome that we are trying to deliver. And it's that focus on outcomes that's incredibly important for us. That when we say hidden KPIs, I don't think there are any hidden KPIs out there anymore. There are millions of KPIs. But I certainly do believe, to one instance, is that there are not 1 or 2 set KPIs that should be used egalitarianly across every single campaign. Because for every client that we look at with those hundreds of metrics, there may be specific of those 5 relevant KPIs or 10 relevant KPIs. They may be different depending on the client, the category, the campaign that you're running. So it's about being vigilant and being knowledgeable about focusing on kind of 4 or 5 key outcomes. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe Lauren or Andrew, from your research and analytics perspectives, are there examples you can give? Because clearly, which KPI is as big a challenge as which data set you dig into?
I don't know if I can answer that because of so much data. One of the issues that we have is because we have terabytes of data and we basically can slice and dice it any way you want, that you can't always predetermine the exact analytic that your client is asking for, or you kind of give them 100. And we find that very difficult ourselves, which is why on our consumer side, where the professional services side, which we can talk about later, is how do you deliver multi-analytics and well and qualitatively. There you basically can do whatever you want. And on the other side, on the syndicated side, we do have some core metrics where you're going to provide insight or reach or frequency, but it varies.
Yeah, I mean, as we look at that life cycle, Andrew, maybe it falls into your expertise as well. How do you then take that and determine which portion is going to be that hidden or not so hidden success factor?
Well, I actually find that one of the largest barriers that face a lot of the projects that we find ourselves involved in is getting the customer to speak up about what they actually want people to do on their sites or in their campaigns. They tend to understand their business well, and they have a website, and they know there's a connection between the two, and yet the conversation between us and them about how one should construct the data prep, the data collection, and the reporting often stumbles when it's time for them to say, this is the stuff I really want to know about. And I find that they often need a lot of, from my point of view, far more direction than you might think. And I think, I believe that, if there are hidden KPIs, they may be some of the most obvious ones. Like, what was the point of this module that you just built?
So Andrew, you sound like a revolutionary. You're saying it's up to the marketer or publisher to have some business goals or some marketer goals to then build a waterfall approach on? Is that what you're saying, Andrew?
Well, it would be nice. So often they have what they will call business goals, but we end up collaborating pretty closely with them and turning those into measurable things. And I think that's that's a recurring theme. How do you take what I want to know about my business into something that actually can be measured and reported against, and then presumably, and I'm sure we'll get to this later, take some kind of action on.
And Rick, how do you, from the product perspective, start to bridge that gap?
Yeah, this is a question I'm happy to field because we have a strong philosophy on this. Many people may associate marketing evolution with our founder, Rex Briggs, who's been a thought leader in the measurement space for, several years, and he wrote a book, popular book, What Sticks, a few years ago. We're going to be evangelizing via a new book that he's coming out with very shortly, a matter of weeks. We just put the website up today. Around a means to, across all media, measure the impact on an apples-to-apples basis, which we refer to as SIRFs, which is an acronym for Spend to Impact Response Function. So when you look for that URL, remember SIRF is spelled with an I, S-I-R-F, SIRFs with an S hyphen up.com, SIRFsup.com. My marketing person's happy now. But what SIRFs...
Yes, you've plugged both a book and a URL.
Yeah, well, it's the book's URL, so it's kind of a package deal.
Are you sponsoring this panel?
What SIRFs are is basically a diminishing impact curve, looking at how much you've spent to how much impact it has. Our view of impact is fairly straightforward. We're trying to get away from the idea of purchase funnel just as a nomenclature, but we talk about purchase highway, but effectively, awareness through consideration, through purchase intent, down to sales data. So, relatively short list of measurements of impact. A challenge becomes with all this behavioral data mapping, what is the linkage between a click and that kind of point in the purchase cycle, but that is measurable, and that's the kind of measurement that I'm sure Compete does and Kantar and we do as well. But when you have then a different curve, this diminishing impact curve for all your different media channels, whether it's Facebook advertising or even a Facebook fan page, television advertising, magazine, etc., you can determine at what point on each of those curves it's no longer having the most impact relative to the next curve. And one of the software tools that I'm involved with, an ROI optimization software we call TMR, does exactly that across all different media, taking benchmarks of hundreds of these impact studies that we've done in the past 10 years, merging that with reach and frequency audience data, gives it's a planning tool. So it gives people an idea of across the budget they want to allocate, what of all these different media channels based on our benchmarks is going to have the most impact for a variety of different types of campaign scenarios.
So what I'm hearing, and let me know if this resonates with you, is that across our experts from the analytics life cycle, that there is no singularity. There really is no one answer. So let me approach it from a slightly different angle. I know when I work with clients, one of the paths to success is to identify the barriers, remove that barrier so you can move on to measurable business success. And often I start on the technology and data side, and candidly, marketers and publishers will say, everything else is okay. But when you get into it after a month or so, you realize that neither the people nor processes can support what's actually found. So Stephen, let's have your perspective. What more broadly, what's the single most important barrier in analytics, and how do you identify and remove it?
Well, that's an easy question. So, why don't we start with this, which is, I'm actually going to stop for a second and go back and say I hate this term big data. We all use this term. This term has become synonymous with what we do because it sounds cool. And it's easier to describe than what we did. Also, we use it because the term analytics has become everything from someone with a spreadsheet all the way up to some kind of technology. So, I don't know of a single reporting company that's now not an analytics company. So all of these things have sort of come on to lead us down this road of big data. And honestly, I'm of the believer that IBM or HP or EMC or someone else push this term because big data leads you to think it's all about lots of data. The more data I have, the more valuable it is. I need more systems to support that. The more systems I have, the more expensive it is, the more people I need. It sort of leads you down this road. I mean, even on this panel, we all talked about, well, I have terabytes and petabytes, and as if that matters, right? Because what matters is the question you ask. I can ask you, is it safe to cross the street? I don't need terabytes of data to figure that out, even though there are terabytes of data available, everything from what's in the air to how bright the sun is, which direction it is. I mean, I can go on and on. So the reason why I bring that up is because it leads to a flawed set of thinking. And one of the biggest things inside your organization is it makes it sound like you need data scientists or people with amazing degrees to figure this stuff out, when the reality is your organization just needs to start thinking about what business questions matter. I mean, this should really be, instead about big data, it should be about big questions. The question not asked is the question that usually is the one that matters the most. And so because most people are pushed, or I should say, most people in your organization look and say, oh, there's a data team, it's their job to figure it out. Well, you've got this weird separation, right? People who know math may have no understanding of the business, or frankly aren't there on the day-to-day, and the people who are day-to-day just think it's their problem over there, and I have to buy them cookies to get them to do my, my problem, because they have so many things that are going on out there. And so even the way you start solving these problems when it's about big data is I have to create this group. Or if I'm in a marketing department, I have to go hire statisticians, or I have to bring Hadoop in, because Hadoop's going to solve my problems as if it's some silver bullet. And so you have all these very complicated things that are going on, yet the most basic thing that needs to be done is to develop questions that maybe data can answer. And maybe. So some they can't, right? What's inside of your head is a question that today I can't answer without, some horrible techniques, waterboarding and things like that. Like, I'm not going to do that, right? Am I waking people up here? Huh? I mean, it was a little quiet. I figured I'd throw one of those out there, see if I got anyone right there.
We're going to get to process in a minute. We'll come back to we'll come back to waterboarding. Absolutely.
She's going to demonstrate
a measurable technique.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but look, that's the challenge, right? The challenge is it's not a welcoming environment. You're not bringing people in, and then all of a sudden, even the marketing departments start thinking, shoot, I need to bring a stats person in. And I will be the first one to tell you, no marketing group needs Einsteins, right? They need Matisse, they need Picasso. They need someone to figure out, okay, after they've been told how the data works for them, they need to figure out how to message it to their customer. But everyone's so fixated on data and solutions and technologies and things like that that they forget the most important thing. And I would argue the only thing that gets the organization focused on solving these problems, which is thinking about what questions really matter. KPIs come out of that, and that's really, I think, the bigger challenge today that no one really spends a lot of time talking about inside their own organization.
Stephen, wait. That's great, but you have to have the platform to be able to answer those questions.
Wow, what a guess. I have that.
I know. What a great segue.
That worked really well. Thank you. But yeah, no, look, look, obviously our argument is there are not enough technology people, there are not enough experts out there, and there are not enough data scientists that we deliver that entire platform to you as an ASP. So clearly we're a little bit biased on that, but we're biased because that's what we believe, which is you don't need to believe me. Like, look at McKinsey, 100 openings for every one person, and this is just at the start. Right? It's not like you're going to build mathematicians in 2 years to catch up with the growth of this concept of scaling or gaining understanding from the knowledge that your customers are trying to share with you, whether it be through the internet or through TV or other things. So, but more my belief is that marketing departments are amazing at conveying very complicated messages, right? Does everyone know what the message of the swoosh from Just Do It, Nike means? Everyone knows that I can be a soccer player, I can be a cycler, I can be a runner, and cyclers and runners hate each other. But we all can get the message from Nike and feel like we're part of the same thing. That's something a marketer does very well, using data. But I don't think they should build data inside of their own companies because it detracts from what their core competency is.
So maybe it's not about big data. Maybe it's about shrinking the enterprise and actually getting people and their partners to work together to achieve those business goals and KPIs. So, Chris,
can I just come back to that for a second? Because I actually want to say no to that.
No, because we've I want to mix it up and make sure we have good points of view. So I'm gonna drag Chris into this because we want the agency perspective as well.
Well, I mean, you can't argue with common sense. right? The fact that the holy grail of our whole industry is always about trying to ask the right questions and answer our clients' questions. The reality is that having all this data available to us allows us to do that a heck of a lot easier. And yes, we don't need everybody in the whole organization to be a data guy, a data person. We need that perfect balance between data, creativity, business sense, and all of these kind of things. And that can never be held by one individual. Or it can, if you start your own company and do incredibly well, Steve. But, at the end of the day, when, as an organization, for us, having accessibility and having all the different data streams on a daily basis makes our life a heck of a lot easier. As long as we know how and when to properly use it, that is when I think, so I'm trying to meet you halfway from the bottom up versus the top down. Because I have 58 data analysts on a daily basis who play in that world and make their living from that world of gathering every single different piece of data that is available to them. And some of those people are able to manipulate, create algorithms, do everything a data scientist can do, but they personally can't answer that business question. They need guidance from individuals like strategists and those people in their organization. So I think we have to get to a point where we meet somewhere in the middle here. I do agree that obviously we have to ask the right questions, but sometimes we don't even know the questions that we're trying to ask. Realistically, it's, 9 times out of 10, awareness becomes the key challenge for all of my advertising campaigns and all my activity. I think having different people with different skill sets through every single organization allows them to bring a point of view about what the most measurable and the most effective KPIs are going to be in every single campaign.
I'm looking for a real-world example from someone up here. We've spent a bit of time talking about candidly, almost a philosophical debate. I'll give my drink ticket to whoever first can give me a real live case example of how we bridge this opportunity.
I can. Sorry, did I just take that away from you guys?
I don't see anybody else jumping.
Look, at the end of the day, I'm here to kind of share examples of success of how we use data in a good way. We work with a luxury chocolate manufacturer. I can't use their name, obviously, but this is a business that had become the largest luxury chocolate manufacturer in the United States. So join the dots, everybody. And they had targeted one group of individuals. They had used traditional marketing techniques to identify a core target audience, who is your average 45-plus rich female living in Connecticut with a nice personification as an individual. Her name was Joan, I think, something like that. And the business had actually reached a plateau level where it couldn't really grow anymore. So we'd spent years and years trying to optimize their campaigns to try and increase their efficiencies by 5 or 6%. Then all of a sudden, the access to billions and billions or terabytes and petabytes and whatever we want to get to. What's the largest available right now? A Zega amazing super Googlebyte? A zettabyte, right? Have all of this information available to us. And then we're able to understand from a real example, using the data that's available to us, all of the different behaviors or luxury chocolate buying behaviors out there. All of a sudden, you're able to use people like Compete to understand that actually a third of all luxury chocolate buying behavior is actually done by younger men. Girlfriends, boyfriends, mothers, grandmothers, those kind of things. So the fact that you have access to all of this kind of data enables you to think about how you segment from a marketing perspective in a completely different way. Then I go to Lauren's company and say, can you actually scale those groups of behaviors? And then we buy all the cookies from that. Now, that's pretty obvious behavioral targeting at scale. But the data that fed our targeting actually fed an actionable insight, which also fed an actionable execution. And most importantly, the increase in ROI was 300% in the first campaign that we ever did. The increase in efficiency was 700%. Those aren't numbers that you can throw around lightly. This is really where big data, and I hate to use the word, but I kind of think it's cool, so I'll be cool for today. or at least the end of this panel, is incredibly important and actionable from a daily basis.
And in that instance, obviously, the ends justifies the means. But what I want to challenge us is how do you know the data is good? Well, one way you know the data is good is if you get business improvement out of it. But Lauren, from your perspective, I want to make sure we get into some practicalities about how do you do this in the real world? What's the process? How do you leverage, apply, and QA disparate data sets?
Very good question, and it's hard. But I'll start with the data is not about the science alone. The data is about the acquisition, the integration, the normalization, just to be able to start using it. For Compete, it's not straightforward to have a 2 million plus panel. We use our proprietary collection with ASPs and ISPs, and every one of those sources has to go through a rigorous QA and analysis, not just on the data, but also on the pieces of data that we actually get from that provider. And when I look at a provider, I'm going to type them by their ability to provide certain information or signal to the overall metric. And we use that to determine which pieces of the panel are going to be composed of these sources versus those sources. That's just the analysis that has to go in before you put it into the pipeline. In addition to getting the data in, you have to have the right systems. We have our own proprietary system as what you have, where we bring the data in. We have to be able to process it at a daily basis, but not only a daily basis, but on demand. Because not only do we provide syndicated information on a daily basis, we provide all our analysts access to the big data where they can derive and create an algorithm that says, I want to find the behavior of people who shop for chocolate online. And we then will write a rule set that goes against the data set, which is all flat file based and metadata proprietary format, pull it back, run it through a normalization engine so that we can actually get sample to population and then have a brand new custom report for our client. And one thing I wanted to bring up, because I think that we had this as part of our topic, was not only do you have all that, but that mere process can take up so much of your time that you're not left with enough time for the insight, which is what I think you were saying, where you have the platform, which makes it easier to not have to do all your data mining or have everybody do data mining and have only a fraction of the company doing the insight.
I also think it's kind of important to think about the matrix out of which the questions might get asked. So in my practice, we work with a lot of different kinds of companies, and they will have different business models. And so one of the ways that we get to, what are the right questions to ask, what are the right, if you will, overused term, KPIs to measure, we kind of break it down into site types, if you will. So a lot of discussion tends to be about brand and what brand wants, and brand is all about awareness, and that is a true statement. It's one kind of site. However, if you're, say, a content site, your KPI, the kind of questions you want to ask are very different. You're not necessarily looking for awareness. You might, for instance, be thinking about how long did people spend on my premium pages, and so your whole approach to asking the questions is defined by the site type. If you're a professional services company or a company that has a complex item to sell, your goal is perhaps lead generation. You want someone to call or email, and so you're not talking about the same kind of thing that a Chevy or a Coke is talking about in terms of awareness. You actually need them to go through a process of gradual engagement with your company through perhaps offering them a white paper if they give you their email or something like that. And those start to generate some useful questions. And then there's another type that we encounter, which we call self-service, which can be either kind of an intranet or say where an insurance company is giving you information, but their goal is for instance, totally the opposite of, say, a brand or a content site, in that they want you to get in and they want you to get out, because they either already have your money or any time you spend on there is costing them money, but they are obliged to give you the bandwidth to get your answers. And so we find that establishing that matrix helps us get the companies we work with to respond in a meaningful way to the "what do you want to measure" question.
So you make that all sound really simple. There's basically 4 business models in the world. Depending on which business model you fit in, you can drive your KPIs. I'm oversimplifying, but if you drive into it, I think Chris articulated the goal isn't incremental 5% improvement, right? It's 100, 200% improvement. And to do that, a lot of marketers and publishers are focusing on personalization of messaging and personalization of content. So my key question for today is, does anybody care about privacy anymore?
Well, I recently wrote an article at ClickZ, which was entitled "It's 2012, Why Are We Still Talking About Privacy?" Because at least in this country, and I think it's certainly different in Europe and elsewhere, we've almost given up the ghost on privacy. I think so many of us, and I'm not saying I'm completely comfortable with it, but so many of us have sort of said, I want access, and I sort of don't care what you find out about me in the process. Years ago, I was working with the Web Analytics Association on their advocacy committee, which dealt with, at that time, building awareness on Capitol Hill about why we shouldn't have restrictions on what marketers can find out, and it was a much more contentious thing back then. I don't know if it's just me in my little bubble who kind of sees it this way, but it does seem like privacy in this country has become much lower of a priority than perhaps it was a few years ago.
There's kind of a weird thing going on, which is if you ask any American about privacy, of course they want their privacy, they want it. But the first time, well, if you go to an airline counter and they boot you off a plane, what do you want to say? Don't you know who I am? You shouldn't let, I should be getting an upgrade, and don't kick me off and things like that. So there's this weird thing where customers want to be personalized to. They want recommendations. 35% of all sales at Amazon come from recommendations. What they don't want to be is targeted, right? Which is kind of a weird advertising acronym, right? We want to target a user, which is what Navy SEALs do, but customers like to be, customers like to have personalization, and they like to, have recommendations. Well, they're 2 sides of the same coin, right? It's just we use horrible acronyms. So when we talk about data or we talk about targeting, these are not positive terms. So I think it's almost this privacy issue is almost self-imposed from a marketing. I feel like the marketing industry is a cobbler's kids problem, which is we don't think about the words we use, and it creates this unnecessary fear. So when we're talking about even data, for most of us, you don't need any PII to do any really solid analysis. You can learn a huge amount about groups. You can learn a huge amount about sort of decision making. And I don't think anyone here is trying to figure out what Steve Messer is doing in the morning. It'd be boring, and it wouldn't help anyone make any money. So that's my personal opinion on it. But again, I think you're right in pointing out this is an American philosophy. Europe and Asia that had very different World War II histories than America, that they see a very different, perspective on that.
Yeah, clearly regulation weighs heavy into this. As a global company, we tend to be self-regulated here in the US, but in the EU, there's a cookie privacy law rapidly moving through that's going to impact a lot of you in this room, because I imagine not everyone is publishing or marketing to solely US-based consumers, and will have radical implications. And we could clearly spend the rest of the time on privacy, but I want to make sure we squeeze in at the end perhaps one of the most important factors, which is which is people. We talked a little bit about knowing that not everybody can be a data scientist, but looking across the whole team in the analytical enterprise, and in that definition I include partners. What can we walk away with today? And Rick, we'll start with you and work back this way in the time we have remaining. You know, what's your advice to how people should organize their people and skill sets?
Sure. Well, I'm glad. Again, glad you brought that up. You know, we've talked. A lot of what we've talked about here is discovering what we don't know, and I think one of the biggest leaks in the bucket of the effectiveness of a lot of large companies' marketing programs is not knowing what they already know, and not getting it in the hands of the right people at the right point in the process of making the right decisions and executing a marketing campaign. We've been making a big initiative exactly on that topic of building what we call a best practices engine, where there's a ton of knowledge that exists all throughout the industry, organizations like OMMA and the IAB, and these are cross-media best practices we're talking about. So in the academic literature and all this kind of literature, there's a lot of knowledge, and then within organizations themselves, they've seen what they've done in past campaigns. And so to create a mechanism for them to recognize the different role types and what are the insights that people at the executive part of the process need, at very executional parts of the process, the creative people, the social media expert, and the analysts. What are and then what is the process? What are the milestones in that process, and what best practices apply to each of those people for each medium or campaign type at what point in the process, and to elevate those as best practices with links back to supporting material. Something we hope is going to have a big impact for a lot of these organizations, and was actually born directly out of demand from, I don't know if I'm at liberty to mention, but an extremely large soft drink, that's what I was trying to say, marketer. So.
Good. We're going to move to the buzzer round right now. So from Chris on inward, in 30 seconds or less, sticking on the people and organizational theme.
Okay, so the question is, what should your organization look like, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
30 seconds. Go.
I'm going to fill the 30 seconds as much as I can. Well, basically how we do it, and one thing we're finding very successful, is not having an ivory tower of data guys. We sit data, human insight, our consumer research group. We sit our business scientists and econometric modelers, and we sit all of our insights and strategy folks all together as one group. It's enforced collaboration, but most importantly what happens is every week all the directors that report into me, we all sit down and talk about what we're working on, and add layers of each individual's expertise onto the solution that we're going to provide to our clients. That means that everybody shares and understands and collaborates exactly how to execute anything from an algorithm in the real world to an actionable human insight. Was that 30 seconds?
Perfect.
Okay.
Lauren, what's your people and organizational advice? Go.
My advice is to get the data out of the IT area and to get it more into the marketing and product area. We're still working with clients where we're automatically, they say, oh, that's the IT guy that has that information. And it's like, yeah, but that's the information that's going to help you survive in this digital world.
So there are methodologies. I mean, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and almost every other department inside of a company other than marketing, there have already been methodologies to bring in sort of what do you call it, Six Sigma, Lean, or whatever it is. They have methodologies to train almost everybody to understand a common language, a common vernacular, and a common way of sharing information. Since everyone's already spoken, I don't need to go through it. Assuming the systems are in place to provide them answers to these questions, you still need that common vernacular. You still need a common training set of people with green belts, black belts, or master black belts, not taking their direct methodology, but that thinking. And I think that's probably the bigger problem, to help people understand how to think about a question, how to convey it back, and also then how to take information and turn that into knowledge.
Hey, Andrew, what are you seeing as the biggest opportunity or barrier from the individual's perspective?
Well, what we try to tell our customers to do is focus on making sure that they have an analytical function, and that's the person who will be able to translate whatever comes out of reporting to business relevance. We also believe that the team needs to include some excellent data preparation functions. So whatever tool it is or whatever methodology it is, if there's no data prep, there's really no good data and hence no insight. And then there needs to be someone who can model the reporting, which is not a strictly technical thing, but it's somewhere between the analyst and the technical. And then finally, in terms of actionability, there needs to be the sort of direct involvement or direct responsibility of editorial and creative.
Good, and we've got a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we have time for audience questions. So if there's something we haven't yet touched on in the people, the process, and the technology to actually apply data and analytics to business success, please fire away.
Yeah, Andrew, I've got a question. Andrew brought up the issue of what clients typically want in the education process. Could you or any of the panelists talk about that gap in terms of what they want for measurable results, from what they start with, what they typically want, versus what they ultimately end up with based on your educating them?
There's always a conversation. Because they usually start out with some rather vague ideas, and depending on how comfortable they are with the details that are needed in order to actually define specific conversion points in their sites, it can go one of two ways. It can either end up where they go through that exercise, which has a lot of can sometimes have political ramifications inside the company, because it's not always those who speak loudest who will have the best parts of the site, and that was the way it always used to work. When you push the data through, you find out that that's not the case anymore many times. The other way is that they sometimes they may get frustrated with that process and say, I just want to know how many people came to this, and this.
Hi, David Wynn, Myra Grocer out of Vermont. Talked a lot about sort of taking data out of IT and sort of giving it to analysts and then to marketers eventually so they can make decisions. Can you talk about sort of, as you try to sort of free up that information and let people, ask the right questions of it? Some examples of, when you've got to give so many qualifications, or you've got to sort of screen the data so much that people are ultimately, you're sort of helping them make the wrong decisions, or giving them information that's really hard for them to act on.
So I'll go on this one, because so you're right, that is really hard. I mean, so the way we do it with the Knowledge Network is our job is to essentially make sure, first of all, we clean the data, denormalize it into a standard data model. But then what it is really about allowing a user access to an analytical application where the analysis is already essentially pre-built, where it has explanations on how to use the analysis, what questions it answers, and what questions it doesn't answer. Then allowing essentially any of the users, let's in this example, a marketing group, to essentially see the same analysis and collaborate around it. So whether it be chat or discussion or whatever it is. So, and each time they do that, that information should be saved around the analysis so that follow-on users can essentially contribute. Because at the end of the day, knowledge is essentially a discussion around a lot of information. And so you're really trying to surface things that are either institutional knowledge that sort of lend some clarity to the data or to the analysis, but also sort of serve it up in a way that is very easy to understand, whether that be simple visualizations or consistency in the sense the analysis is always the same. That's why we worry a lot about spreadsheets where someone makes an adjustment, but it looks like the last spreadsheet I saw, but it's different. Or someone does some data analysis and comes back and says, here's an answer, but doesn't allow people to see the information around it. So it's their conclusion as opposed to potentially a new source of knowledge.
We're not doing our job if we're not providing insight. My worst nightmare is when a client comes and says, I want the raw data, or I just want you to give me a feed, and they don't have the ability to understand what that information means. We've done analysis where we've shown the client something that was happening on their site or in the competitive market that they had no clue was going on. That's our bread and butter. So I don't like giving out the raw data just to say, hey, figure it out.
Oh, come on, Lauren, share.
Well, for you.
Okay.
For you.
Okay. No, because just to build on that point, I think it's right to have the right people dealing with all the data that is available, but the transparency and the access to that is going to actually make the people that work on a day-to-day basis on brands, if they have the knowledge of how to manipulate and the expertise behind them, actually to do their job better. So that's why with Compete, we're launching a desktop manipulation tool. So it's not about holding on. That's the point. I don't want to get as saying it's about holding on tightly to the data. It's about sharing it as long as it's done in a responsible manner.
Hey, Chris. How's it going? And Andrew, Jeff. Hey, listen, there's a lot of talk about telling a brand what they don't know with data, whether it's first party, third party, the intersection thereof. And I'll get to this question, and it's probably going to be at you, Chris. You know, we're basically talking about data that's ultraviolet. You don't see it until you put the appropriate lens up in front of your face to see it. And, you know, to see that data through that lens takes a significant amount of effort and investment, whether it's platform or skills. And we have seen, you know, over the course of the evolution of the web, and, you know, commercial web's been around since '93, and I've been with it all along that, come up through IT, come up through marketing, come up through data science and whatnot, and kind of now I'm in this position where I have like all these various skills and methodologies to kind of tell a story. But to tell that story means I got to spend 40, 60, 80 hours to tell that story. And most brands have a hard time accepting that from an analyst, marketer, data scientist or whatnot, unless they subsidize them via, you know, the white paper scenario or whatever. How do you deal with this challenge of going to a brand and saying, you know, I've got something really compelling and valuable to tell you, but you got to trust me from an investment perspective? And I know it's a little bit easier from the enterprise, maybe not so much, because I think it probably transcends SMB all the way up through enterprise. But how do you do that? I mean, how do you know, because you don't know until you've actually spent time with that to kind of develop that story and to develop, you know, those actionable insights, to Stephen's point. You know, so I'm very much like, you know, and I hear you, Stephen, about this whole thing about we have to be artists with this data, and we have to tell a really compelling story, and it's got to be the art director treatment of the deck and the whole nine. That takes investment and time, and how do you deal with that up front without SOWs, without subsidization, whatever the case may be? The whole panel can answer this one, hopefully.
Do you want me to start, Barry?
Yes.
Yeah? So
I know, I took away from your soapbox.
I haven't got a soapbox. I might have one after that comment.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about the art director as a whole, and we talk about the data person. They have to work as a pair. That's why our creative model isn't broken. It still is very, very successful, having two people with different skills together. I think, Barry, one of the most difficult things ever is me going up to a client and say, why don't you trust me? Yeah, that's way past. I think that you know, we have to have data and information that actually does that, backs up in an effective manner, which is why benchmarking is incredibly important for us when we go with any new idea towards a client. So if we think about mixing those things together, having the right people, having the right benchmarks, but actually it being part of everything that we do on a daily basis, and I think organizations should be investing more behind data stories and data management as a whole. I don't add that to a scope of work. I work with other WPP companies and other partners to ensure that we're delivering and spending time and energy in delivering the right message. And I mean that as a message to our marketers, not as into the consumer. It's an investment piece versus anything else. You know, we are willing to put thousands and thousands of dollars behind doing that, because at the end of the day, we know it is an investment and it's going to pay out.
Yeah, I would add to that, you know, something I've been hearing throughout the panel here is I think where we really as an industry need to be getting to as the service providers, as the consultants to the advertisers, is to help them with what are the right questions. You know, when we just make it open-ended, that, you know, here we're making it easier with all these new algorithms and, you know, more and more data sources, more and more data, you know, I think we're not always doing them a service. You know, there's a tremendous amount of value in all that data, and there's still a lot to be discovered. But we increasingly understand there are some key questions that we can lead them to that they need to be asking. You know, I think, not to be up here hawking that we have the answer to everything, I think there are like three, as I'm hearing this, I'm just thinking, there are maybe three key areas of analytics that impact a lot of what people are spending on. One is what Chris was talking about in his case study, which is, am I targeting the right people? Am I, you know, I have a hypothesis that these are the right people who are buying my thing. A lot of times that hypothesis is wrong, you know? If they're targeting women for chocolate and it turns out men are the ones who are actually buying the chocolate, that's a key insight. You know, consumer insights, that's one area of this. Another that I don't think any of us
Rick, if I could wrap us up. So
Sure.
what one is audience targeting, and what are the
Is
two other use
creative
cases you
impact, creative measurement. We really haven't talked about that at all, but like, is my creative any good? That's a huge part of the problem. You know, my campaign didn't deliver results. Why not? Well, because your creative stunk and you never measured it. And the third is, you know, what we're specialized in is, you know, how much do I spend and how much impact is that really having? And, you know, tying back to what Suraj said as well, I think we need to simplify, and not just simplify the KPIs, but simplify the questions. And benchmarks, as Chris said, I think are a key part of that as well.
Great. Thank you, Rick, and thank you all. And just for all of your benefit, a similar point of view on answering the question, what are the use cases of data? Just last month, IIB sponsored a report on that topic, and in their view, it's audience optimization, channel optimization, yield optimization, and targeted media buying.
Please join me in thanking Jeff and the panel. Thank you.